Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Before we dive in, make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this video a like, because what I'm about to reveal today could completely change the way you think about attraction, desire, and control in relationships. Imagine this: the person you've been chasing, texting, thinking about day and night, suddenly goes silent. No messages, no calls, no reactions. Your heart skips. Panic sets in. You find yourself replaying every conversation, every word, every little thing you might have done wrong. And here's the brutal truth. They aren't thinking about what you did wrong. They're watching, waiting, calculating. And what happens next can flip the entire game in ways most men don't understand. When both of you stop contacting each other, something shifts in the invisible emotional battlefield between you. The chase, the control, the subtle power dynamics. You're no longer on the same side, yet somehow the tension thickens. Absence doesn't just make the heart grow fonder, it awakens the primal layers of desire and curiosity that text messages, constant notifications, and over-availability have long dulled. You see, when you're always there, present, responding, the emotional stakes drop. Familiarity breeds comfort, and comfort rarely sparks obsession. Now, let me tell you a secret most men completely overlook. It's not the messages you send or the calls you make that pull someone closer. It's the absence of them, the silence, the space you create that makes her brain run through all the scenarios where she might have lost you. The empty seat at the dinner table, the phone that doesn't light up, the idea that you could go on without her attention. That tension, it's magnetic. This is where your emotional power begins to rise, quietly, almost invisibly. When neither of you reaches out, the dynamic stops being about who wants whom more and starts becoming about who can hold their ground while still remaining emotionally captivating. The psychological flip happens when she realizes, slowly, that your absence doesn't hurt you the way her absence might hurt her. That realization, it's dangerous. Not in a threatening way, but in a way that awakens desire, respect, and curiosity all at once. Most men panic here. They send the follow-up text, they apologize, they overcompensate, and in doing so, they destroy the very tension that could have drawn her closer than ever. But you're about to learn why waiting, observing, and holding your space is not just strategic, it's magnetic. It's the hidden art of power she's wired to notice, even if she doesn't understand it yet. Here's something most men never realize. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is loaded. Silence carries weight. It tells her without words that you are no longer defined by her attention. And when she senses that, her mind begins to wander, dangerously, irresistibly. She starts replaying moments you shared, analyzing your gestures, the way you laughed, the way you looked at her. That absence triggers a question she can't easily answer. Why isn't he reaching out? And here's the thing. Women are wired to detect patterns, to seek emotional consistency. When that consistency suddenly disappears, her subconscious goes into overdrive. She begins constructing a story in her mind where you are more than just a person she can text or call at will. You become an enigma, a puzzle she can't solve immediately, and nothing is more intoxicating than mystery, especially when it's paired with a history of emotional connection. This is where the game flips. The dynamic is no longer about chasing, it's about recognition. She starts noticing your absence in ways she never noticed your presence. Every memory, every inside joke, every laugh you shared suddenly magnifies. The moments you spent together become illuminated in her mind. And here's the kicker. Because she can't reach you, she starts valuing you more, often more than she valued you when you were constantly available. You might think you're losing control, but in reality, control is shifting. The unseen psychological balance tilts subtly but decisively in your favor. Desire, attraction, curiosity, they're all rising without a single word from you. The emotional space you've created forces her to fill it with thoughts of you. She begins to imagine scenarios where you are with someone else, scenarios where you might be happy without her. And that thought, just the thought, sparks a primal pull. This is the invisible power most men never tap into. They mistake absence for loss, but absence is a tool, a psychological lever that can make her mind chase you instead of the other way around. And when she finally breaks that silence, the conversation will not be the same. She will come forward with attention, with questions, with vulnerability, because absence awakened something in her that constant presence could never touch. You have to understand, this is not manipulation, it's awareness. Awareness of the hidden ways human desire works. And when both of you stop contacting each other, the game isn't about winning or losing anymore. It's about awakening a force that has been dormant, a force that draws people together in ways words and actions alone never could. Now, let's get real about what's happening beneath the surface, where most men don't even realize the game is being played. Absence is not just a gap in communication, it's a mirror reflecting desire, curiosity, and sometimes fear. When you stop reaching out, her mind instinctively searches for you. She asks herself questions she didn't know she'd ask. What is he thinking? Does he care? Did I push him away? That uncertainty, that tension, that's exactly what fuels the emotional fire. You see, attraction isn't built on constant presence. It's built on intrigue, challenge, and the subtle tension of uncertainty. When she has unlimited access to you, the brain starts to categorize you as familiar, safe, and ultimately predictable. Predictable is boring, but when you step back, when you let the silence grow, the unknown awakens. Her mind starts filling the void with images of you, of what it would feel like to have your attention again. That's the invisible gravity pulling her closer. Here's the psychological twist. She doesn't just want your presence, she wants your mind, your energy, your emotional weight. And absence magnifies that. Every laugh, every conversation you shared, every intimate moment she remembers suddenly carries more emotional power than it ever did before. Her subconscious begins associating you not just with pleasure, but with emotional intensity, the kind that leaves a mark, that lingers, that makes her question her own heart. Most men misinterpret this stage. They panic. They think silence means loss, so they rush to fill it with words, with attention, with explanations. That destroys the tension. That extinguishes the magnetic pull you've created. The truth is, the harder it is for her to reach you, the more she starts wanting to. The less available you are, the more your absence occupies her mind. And once she notices that you are perfectly capable of existing without her constant validation, the emotional scales tilt, subtly, almost invisibly, but irrevocably. This is the moment the game flips completely. Desire starts to chase her curiosity. Attraction is no longer about what she can see or touch. It's about what she imagines. The silence becomes fertile ground for obsession, respect, and longing. And the man who understands this doesn't act out of fear. He acts out of patience, strategy, and awareness of how human desire functions when it is allowed to breathe, to ache, to expand. If you've been wondering why some men seem to effortlessly pull attention without chasing, this is it. It's not charm, it's not manipulation. It's the silent force of absence, the hidden leverage most men never see, but every woman feels. And the moment you realize this, the way she experiences you changes forever. Let's dig into the hidden emotional triggers that silence ignites, triggers most men never even notice, yet they determine the intensity of desire. When you stop contacting her, you're no longer giving her certainty. And humans, especially women, are wired to crave emotional certainty while simultaneously being drawn to emotional challenge. That's why absence works. It creates a tension between curiosity and longing, desire and doubt. Think about it. Every time she reaches for her phone and you're not there, her brain fires off tiny alarms. Where is he? What is he doing? Does he even think about me? Those alarms aren't just questions. They're the beginnings of emotional pull. They force her to consider your life without her constant involvement. And in that space, she starts to notice details she ignored when you were always present. The way you think, your humor, your confidence, your energy. Here's the subtle art most men miss. It's not about ignoring her to be cruel. It's about giving her the space to feel the weight of what your attention means. When she realizes your presence isn't guaranteed, her emotional evaluation intensifies. Every memory, every laugh, every shared secret begins to accumulate value. Her brain starts running simulations, imagining scenarios where she could lose you, where she could miss out. And suddenly, she's chasing feelings, not information. This is the point where the balance of power shifts quietly. She begins to desire not just your time, but your emotional essence. That longing is stronger than any text, any call, any gesture you could have sent while constantly available. Absence awakens reflection, comparison, and a subtle urgency. She starts asking herself questions she didn't realize she needed answers to. Do I want him back? Was I taking him for granted? Can I imagine my life without him? Most men sabotage this moment because they interpret silence as rejection or loss. They panic and try to fill the void. But in doing so, they eliminate the very force that was building attraction invisibly, imperceptibly. Patience becomes power. Holding your ground becomes magnetic. Absence, in this context, isn't emptiness. It's a tool to evoke curiosity, reflection, and ultimately, desire. Understand this deeply. When both of you stop contacting each other, the emotional stakes skyrocket. You're no longer competing with texts or calls. You're competing in her mind, in her emotions, in her perception of your value. And once she feels that invisible pull, that craving for your attention, the dynamic is completely flipped. What she thought she controlled now shifts toward you, silently, powerfully, and irrevocably. Now, this is where most men completely miss the invisible turning point. The moment absence becomes emotional attraction. It's subtle, almost imperceptible, but it changes everything. When neither of you reaches out, her mind begins constructing a version of you she can't stop thinking about. A version that is confident, untouchable, and independent. That version isn't created by your words, your gestures, or your presence. It's created by your silence. Here's the truth. Women are not attracted to neediness. They are drawn to presence that exists without dependency, to a man whose life moves forward regardless of her attention. When she realizes that your world doesn't collapse without her messages, without her approval, without her immediate reaction, desire awakens. She begins to see you as someone worthy of pursuit, rather than someone who is always available for consumption. And this shift, this subtle recalibration of her emotional valuation, is irreversible if handled correctly. The psychological mechanism at play is primal. Absence creates scarcity, and scarcity triggers focus. The more she notices that your attention is limited, the more her brain starts to assign value to it. She begins to replay your interactions, to weigh memories, to analyze emotional imprints you've left. That space you've created, intentionally or not, becomes fertile ground for longing. Her subconscious mind is actively chasing you now, crafting fantasies, imagining scenarios where she reconnects, where she feels the intensity of your presence again. This is why men fail. They confuse silence with surrender. They believe that if they stop reaching out, they risk losing her. In reality, they risk losing only the ordinary version of themselves while giving her the chance to recognize the extraordinary version. And when she finally feels the pull, the desire, the need for connection, it won't come from manipulation or chasing. It will come from the emotional resonance you've silently cultivated. At this point, the dynamic has flipped completely. She moves toward you emotionally, intellectually, and sometimes physically, not because she was pressured, but because absence awakened curiosity, respect, and attraction. She is now chasing what she once took for granted, and you are no longer a passive participant. You are the magnetic center she orbits around. The lesson here is undeniable. In relationships, in attraction, in emotional dynamics, less is often more. Silence, absence, and patience are not passive. They are active strategies that transform desire into something deeper, something unavoidable. And when both of you stop contacting each other, the game is no longer about who wants whom more. It becomes about who commands the emotional gravity in the relationship. And absence, when used wisely, gives that power to the man who understands it. Now, let's seal the truth you rarely hear. Once the game has flipped, the way forward determines whether the attraction holds or fades. The silence you maintained is not just a tactic, it's the foundation of emotional gravity. But here's the catch. It must be balanced with presence that is meaningful, intentional, and unmistakably confident. Every word, every interaction, every glance now carries weight because it comes from a man who has mastered absence without losing himself. You see, after the initial pull, she will test you. Subtle cues, indirect questions, small provocations. They are not challenges to your worth, but measures of the invisible power you now hold. She is instinctively checking, Is he still the man who doesn't need me to validate him? Does he remain grounded, untouchable, desirable? And your response, or lack thereof, determines whether she moves closer or loses interest. This is the silent negotiation that defines modern attraction, far beyond the superficial gestures most men rely on. Every interaction now is amplified. A simple smile, a brief message, or a casual plan carries emotional resonance because it is rare, because it is not given freely, and because it comes from someone whose world exists independently of her. She notices the difference between desperation and choice, between availability and selective presence. That difference, this subtle, almost invisible distinction, is magnetic. It draws her in without you ever needing to chase. Here's the final insight. Absence flips the game, but it also exposes authenticity. Women sense sincerity in the space you create. They feel your confidence, your patience, your calm presence, and it awakens desire in ways words cannot replicate. When both of you stop contacting each other, the emotional tension that builds is not just longing, it's recognition of value, of power, and of a man who understands the hidden rules of attraction. The ultimate lesson: true emotional influence does not come from constant interaction. It comes from knowing when to withdraw, when to hold space, and when to show up fully, intentionally, and powerfully. Desire thrives in tension. Respect grows in absence. And attraction, the kind that leaves a lasting mark, emerges when you are fully present, yet fully yourself, independent of anyone else's approval. So remember this: silence is not emptiness, absence is not loss. When both of you stop contacting each other, the dynamic flips, the power shifts, and desire awakens. And if you can hold that space, navigate it with patience, and act with intention, you will never chase again. Instead, you will command attention, respect, and attraction, quietly, irresistibly, and permanently.